And I will never forget that day, because I could see Gronya Hurst, who these days, as I'm sure the audience will know, is leading up the fight in the UK as the CEO of the BGC. And she deserves all the credit in the world for it. She was putting together the then GVC's responsible gambling strategy.
Right.
And I'm thinking, why on earth are you doing this? What is this for? How wrong I was. How foolish I was. So thanks to her and other people, I gradually realized, look, yeah, there's much more to it. Sum it up, yeah. It's been a gradual evolution, a gradual transformation from even a hard-nosed regulatory lawyer and a lobbyist. I'm still wearing that hat at the present day. To someone who's instilled into his thinking and approach the absolute need to protect customers, the industry's customers, in an efficient but also somewhat passionate way.
Martin, thank you for being here. I think it is a great opportunity to meet in person and to have a discussion because, to be honest, for the past couple of times when we were appearing at conferences together, or rather say appearing in panels, I was disappointing seeing you just from the screen and not sitting next to me. But I guess it's part of the fact that you are living abroad, as they say, across the pond. So yeah, I'm happy that we're here. I'm happy that we met in Prague. Is it your birthplace? Did you were born in Prague?
Well, first of all, let me say that I'm delighted to be here. I suppose we were both born in good old Czechoslovakia.
Yeah.
I would be ashamed if I no longer understood Slovak, because as we discussed, when we were driving down here, I met some wonderful Slovak or even Czechoslovak people when I did law school here in Prague. So thanks again for having me. It's great to see you face to face and in the flesh. To answer your question, no, I was born in, I suppose what in the grand scheme of things would be a tiny little town in northeastern Bohemia by a super lengthy name of Dvůr Králové nad Labem. So imagine that in my British passport.
Yeah.
Good thing is that they don't put it on US green cards. But yeah, I've lived abroad for the last over 16 years by now. But it's always an absolute pleasure to come back to Prague and also see you in the flesh. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, and my pleasure. These podcasts are about the persons which are appearing here, but let's just not digress too far. So I'm going to cut the chase towards asking you the question perhaps many would be asking, or at least some would be curious about. What is it that you are now doing, Martin? What is your work currently? What are you working on?
Well, I'll give you 2 points if I may. I'm still, perhaps not as much as you, but I'm still doing my best to make the gambling industry an even better place, because I've always been a big fan. At the same time, I totally appreciate that we're not perfect. Work or job-wise, if you will, having spanned 16 years with the industry behemoths of, and they've gone through a variety of name changes, but ultimately Flutter and Tane. I'm transitioning to a new job still within the industry, which hopefully will be revealed in not too a distant future. Long story short, yeah, I'm very much inclined, if not hell-bent on staying in this industry. That's always treated me really well, and hopefully I've contributed my small part to its success.
Yeah, it's good to hear that you are not abandoning the ship. Not if that I would expect it from you, because I think that you have a very strong track of record of what you have contributed to where we are at right now. And I would imagine that you would have to be very disappointed to get out of here, because I think that you can... what I'm trying to say is that what is kind of obvious from the work that you've been doing is that you, if not passion, that you have a dedication for such thing, to be contributing to making online gambling a better world. So it's good that you are staying with us. But still, I'm going to dig this a little bit deeper. Can you at least outline what is it going to be? Like, I mean, okay, reduction of gambling-related harm, but more on the commercial side or more on the support side? Anything that you can squeeze out just a little bit out of this?
First of all, thank you very much for your very kind words. I will try to live up to them going forward. Secondly, to try to answer your question without giving too much away, I've always been on the operator side, so that is not going to change. And my dedication, if not passion, for the likes of responsible gambling, regulation, rooting out the black markets, I should be saying, will hopefully be shining through the new role.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you very much. Circling back, you have outlined it when you were speaking about the 16 years, different operators. So you are an educated lawyer, as far as I understand. And your early jobs were not in the gambling industry, so where you were working at, was it like a regular law firms for a couple of years at the beginning? And then in 2009, you started working at Paddy Power. That would be Flutter, if I'm correct, right? One of the brands. And right, in a legal positions. So what got you into that? I mean, how did that happen? Why gambling?
Pure happenstance,
Oh,
if
yeah.
you will, as it goes, coincidence. Because as you've said, I did the Prague Law School with a year out in Belgium on the good old Erasmus exchange program. And then when I came back, I started clerking in a law firm in Prague. The law firm used to be called Salens, or originally it was actually a French law firm. So we always had an internal debate whether it was meant to be Salens or Salon. But then Denton stepped in and resolved this conundrum for the law firm. I was no longer with the firm. But as I started saying, as fate would have had it, Betfair that ultimately got, some people would say merged, some folks would argue that they got acquired by Paddy Power, became one of the clients. And I ended up representing them in connection, those 16, 17 years ago. The incipient debates about what ended up being the Czech gambling, or the new Czech Gambling Act piece of legislation that to this day governs the industry here in Prague and beyond in the Czech Republic, of course. Fast forward a bit, back in 2009, for one foolish reason or another, Betfair summoned me to London, offered me an internship, and that internship got crafted, or transformed rather, into a permanent role. So I had 8 very happy years at Betfair, though it's fair to say that towards the end of the spell, and those guys are still my friends, so I'm trying to put it in the nicest and most elegant way. I felt that I might be ripe for my next challenge.
Right, and was there anything relevant to responsible gambling at that time, or was it purely legal compliance about other stuff?
Well, not always, but for the last 16 years in the industry, also worn the proverbial lobbying hat. So going in, negotiate with the governments about regulating markets. So you may want to call it lobbying, you may want to call it market entries. As regards responsible gambling, I had the absolute pleasure and distinct privilege when I was at then Betfair to have worked with Joe Buxter, who was the RG lead, and I believe till this day, and I apologize, Joe, if you've moved on as well, but in the last few years, Joe's been with GamStop in the UK, so really one of the leading characters in the UK, well, if not global, responsible gambling space. Said that, as you would know better than most, it's also fair to say, and I was at Betfair between 2009 and 2017, responsible gambling would not have necessarily been top of mind, top of the agenda. It's progressively made its way all the way up there. But it wouldn't have been as, I would suggest, intense as it is these days, or
Right.
such a key factor in the evolution of this industry.
Right. I mean, because it goes hand in hand to some extent, the legal and responsible gambling, because, as far as I see it, it has started as a regulatory requirement, right? To be watching over the players at that time had been seen more as a burden than as something that could be commercially viable for the companies. With some companies, it still is the case. But how I see it when I was looking at your resume, right? I mean, how you were going through different roles, is that gradually going through these roles to end up in a position where basically you would have become an expert for responsible gambling. Was it like that? Also in connection, because I want to follow on your transition to Entain, where at that time it was called GVC, where at least as the resume says, you have worked on the regulatory roles. And only after you have moved to the United States, it was like responsible gambling. So was it like that? Was the process gradual like this, or was there a break at some point?
Yes and no would be the answer. I may give you the dubious one.
Okay.
And I might say, I believe I would have mentioned it a few times before, some other interviews. And it may come across as rather awful. Having come from the then, that's the operative part, the then Betfair and progressively Petty Power, ultimately Flutter world, as we've just discussed. Responsible gambling's been part of the conversation, but it was much more about market entries, and even, to be blunt, if we were to run this marketing campaign in a jurisdiction that is yet to regulate, can
Right.
we get away with it?
Okay, so like a pragmatic overview given the environment at the time.
Exactly. Underpinned, so great way of putting it, underpinned by legal advice and risk assessment. And in my first few months with then GVC, I had the great privilege and pleasure to have met the person that, till this day, that we both moved on, I would call my corporate other half. Corporate. Yeah, if my wife ever is going to watch that, or
Right.
Gronya's husband, corporate.
Underscore this.
Exactly, is the critical part to that statement. And I will never forget that day, because I could see Gronya Hurst, who these days, as I'm sure the audience will know, is leading up the fight in the UK as the CEO of the BGC. And she deserves all the credit in the world for it. She was putting together the then GVC's responsible gambling strategy.
Right.
And I'm thinking, why on earth are you doing this?
Mm-hmm.
What is this for? How wrong I was. How foolish I was. So thanks to her and other people, I gradually realized, look, yeah, there's much more to it. To your
Right.
point, it's not just compliance exercise.
Yeah.
It's perhaps even a way of life, something to be passionate about, still within the guardrails of the need to achieve the strategic objectives of these, in particular, listed businesses like the Flutters and Entains and many others
Right.
of this world, i.e. long-term sustainability of the businesses and the market or markets as a whole. So really, to sum it up, yeah, it's been a gradual evolution, a gradual transformation from even a hard-nosed regulatory lawyer and a lobbyist, I'm still wearing that hat till the present day, to someone who's instilled into his thinking and approach the absolute need to protect customers, the industry's customers, in an efficient but also somewhat passionate way.
I would certainly say that it's not a bad thing. I mean, to connect the lobbying part with the part of protecting players, because you need to quite often convince people or basically explain to people. And I appreciate what you have said before, that you were in a position that you didn't really understand, like what this responsible gambling department should do. I think it is the case, or at least it was the case for many people, because, the environment that you are in, it shapes how you are proceeding things, how you understand things. And I believe that some people in some organizations are still in this kind of a position that they do not really understand why and how. And the revelation could come to them when they will be some sort of an inspiration, as it was in your case. And I think it's very mature for you to saying that, because some people would say, okay, this is something which might be considered to be vulnerable, so I'm just gonna act like I've always been on the side. But I think it's very fair to say that it was like this, because some of the people listening to this might be in that position that basically these are some sort of an influences that they see, and they might need to take a step forward. But then things have dramatically, I guess, changed when you've moved to US SVP for how's it, regulatory affairs and responsible gambling. That's the job title, right? So I guess you were asked within the company to cover this position in the US. It was at the time when the United States were at the beginning of their journey, or somewhere like, right, of regulation of online gambling. So how did this went? How did it go?
First of all,
Right.
let me say, feel free to edit this. But now you and folks out there may have a lot of dirt on me, which I don't mind at all. Oh yeah, the token responsible gambling guy. He didn't give a monkeys about it back in the day. So that may be a message that the audience may take from this podcast. Hopefully not. I shall digress again. And I was very, on a serious note, privileged and honored and grateful, because I suppose, like, I would even go as far as saying many Europeans with the influence of US films/movies, and I'm a big sports guy, as you know, so I've always followed US sports, in particular hockey, but then progressively also American football and basketball, even into baseball these days. So that's been part of my dream, I would go as far as saying that. Living in the States. And Tane and my then boss, Rob Hoskin, one of the greatest industry characters I have ever met, helped me make it happen. I will, and in that regard, let me make another confession.
Okay.
Because got invited, and I've done work in the US before, from afar, traveling over there. I got appointed into this role, and I swear to you, I'm thinking, how on earth, and it wouldn't be much fruitier words, I would go about this.
That's
I've never lived there. Do I really know the country? Do I really know the people?
yeah.
And then I had to impose on myself the need to concoct a strategy that would be developed and launched. And I'm not going to go into detail, but just in terms of the highlights. And I'll be forever grateful to Paul Buck and Epic Global Solutions, but many other folks, like our friend Bill Pasquale III. We've done a panel with him this morning.
Yeah.
For helping me out, because Paul, Bill, and I, we would go and get the likes of the major leagues, even the NCAA, to sign up to Epic's program that was underpinned and supported by the Entain Foundation US that I figured I could launch. So to come full circle, I suppose what in my mind was quite telling was the difference between how many people were prepared to shake my hand, in some cases even hug me, when I went to the 2019, I believe it was, SBC, the then New Jersey conference, the North America one. I swear to you, I would have known, and then the subsequent G2E, 10 people.
Yeah.
And we moved, fast forward to 21, 22, it's dozens of people. So I'm not trying to sound too big-headed or big-headed, but I suppose in one way or another that strategy has worked. And really the message, and that's the final point I'm trying to convey, that it's about, and lots of folks tend to underestimate it, it's about the relationships.
Yeah.
And having a great debate, and we've had a very good chat on the way down here. It's always appreciated. So it's about, that's what I'm trying to say, about the rapport.
It is. I mean, and when I was listening to you speaking before, I know that you've been doing a lot of work around regulators and traveling there with Bill Pascal and talking about stuff, explaining. And I guess it was part of the journey. And again, I appreciate what you're saying because I can relate to that. When I started working for Casino Guru, I didn't know bananas about online gambling and responsible gambling. And fast forward like 12, 15 months, I was appearing at conferences, at panels, talking with people who were in the industry for 10, 15 years, which, compared with my 10, 15 months. So I felt a huge imposter syndrome, or I feel like a huge imposter. And I have that till this day. And like you explained before, it's, sometimes I am surprised as well, like how well things are being accepted. And often I'm not really sure, how I'm going to do things, how it's going to work out. But I guess that boils down to the thing that I think should be spoken more often, that all of us, we are just trying to figure out things on how to do them. And sometimes we succeed and sometimes we failed. But it's like, when you look up to your role models, people, when you get closer to them, you realize that they are very similar to you. They just did perhaps a more hard work, a more sleepless nights, and more early wakes, and got there. But they all appeared in situations like that.
Oh, absolutely. Your journey in the industry, no doubt for fact, is inspirational for many, including myself. So we might have started in the same place and might be on a very, very similar journey. So I would hate to come across patronizing, but I don't think you would need to. You may feel it, but there's no dose of the imposter syndrome here, because clearly you're one of the most passionate folks I've ever met, passionate about responsible gambling and making the industry, may sound corny, as the Americans say, cheesy as the Brits say, but you give it your all and your heart is in it. Still, ultimately, especially on the operator side, we're talking about businesses that need to make money, generate revenue to keep the wheel spinning. But there's certainly a very prominent human element to their operations as well.
Yeah, that's true.
So to return the compliment.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. I guess it is connected with, if you put your heart into it and if you put your dedication into it, you will succeed at some point. And at some point you will, like what they say, it's you reap what you sow. Is it the right expression? Not sure, but
it is, yeah.
I guess we got the point.
If I may very briefly, in my experience, what's totally gratifying is when you manage to convert people. Like, I will not name a single organization, but once again, looking at, or for the purposes of this point, I would be looking at the US sports space. Back then, most definitely not now. I'm not necessarily talking about the latest scandals that are rather unfortunate. But a lot of these organizations, they were aware of these issues, but they might have thought, look, we got this. What are you doing here telling us, a gringo, someone from overseas, that we need to step our efforts up on the responsible gambling integrity side of things? And don't get me wrong, it wasn't just me. It's like a lot of people from within the industry would have gone and talked to US sports and Brazilian sports and European sports and what have you. So I suppose what is gratifying, and I'm not trying to poo-poo anyone, what's gratifying is to see the mind shift. These organizations, these behemoths outside of the gambling industry go, yeah, hang on, actually, what these people are telling me makes perfect sense, and our interests are aligned.
Yeah.
So that's what I would call a practical upshot and practical outcome of all these efforts up and down the industry. It's lots of folks like yourselves. We talked about Bill Pascal. A lot of the organizations, I'm trying deliberately not to name people because then I would forget lots of great names.
Right, yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's good to point it out like this, because then you can basically say that all of that getting together, talking, and trying to figure out things, it's not in vain because it can influence people. And it gets me to one of the questions that I have prepared, which is about the regulation around United States, because there has been a numerous articles, criticism, opinion pieces about how the regulation of, I don't know how many states is it now, more than 40, of at least sports betting, some of them have online casino as well, that it has fueled increase in problem gambling. And it's basically, some would even point out that this is the cause of it, this is the reason for it. So how would you address something like that? How do you perceive that?
This is really waking up the New Yorker in me. I've only lived in the New York metropolitan area for some 4 years, so I have absolutely no right to claim that, but still. I believe that this is misinterpretation or misunderstanding of the root cause.
Mm-hmm.
This industry, and we both love it, it does come across as rather controversial, comes with a stigma, and that may not change. But I believe the way to address the stigma is not to bury one's head in the proverbial sand. It's to go, regulate it. And yes, the regulation, to answer your question, the regulation does not increase the rate of problem gambling. Yes, it comes associated with increased advertising, which plays a role. But if you bear with me, this is the message I'm trying to convey. As a result of the regulation, in particular in the States, the industry's landed in even more spotlight.
Yeah.
Limelight every now and then.
It's in front of people, right? They can see it.
Yeah, left, right, and center. So, as a result of the regulation, and the reason why these scandals get reported what appears to be on a more frequent basis, is the fact that it all happens in the regulated environment. Of course, some of the illegal schemes, they exist outside of the legal environment. But the point is that the regulation has allowed for far more granular and far more efficient detection of these issues, including the most recent sports integrity scandals, like the last 3-4 years across the NHL, the NBA, and Shohei Ohtani's interpreter, and what have you. But it gets reported. It doesn't get brushed under the carpet or the rug for American audience. And it can be, and it is being addressed. So bringing it back to responsible gambling, regulation is the fundamental, is the starting point, gives us an opportunity to go and develop even more efficient, responsible gambling tools, both when it comes to detection, ideally, of course, even prior to that, prevention and treatment. And it also, because it's now in the regulated space, it attracts additional funding, which helps with building up programs, building up clinics, and what have you to address it. So very long story short, here's the message, here's the zinger, as they say. Regulation's a great thing. By and in itself, it does not increase problem gambling rates. And it's a starting point to go and address problem gambling.
So it sounds like an inevitable evil if you want to regulate an activity in the country, especially in a situation where such an activity is already happening, because the regulation does not invent online gambling. It has been here. People were gambling, but people wouldn't see it. Those that didn't know anything about it wouldn't see commercials. They wouldn't see things in the media. And once it's in front of them, then they can address it. So is it like that? Do you agree with that? That basically it has to go through a sort of like a similar process, that you will get a backlash from public and you will get numbers which are going to be appearing as increasing when you want to regulate something like this?
Ultimately, it's political would be the cynical answer. And yes, I agree. And I understand why lots of people would get annoyed with the ever-present gambling, or in the States, sports betting related adverts. The industry has lately dialed it down a little bit. So yes, the public reaction ultimately fuels the political, the regulatory response, but also the practical response by the industry. The other point I would make in that regard is that in most instances, we're talking in this space about global and listed companies. And all that has a role to play. But really, the critical point I'm trying to bring up here is the fact that while each and every jurisdiction and its cultural idiosyncrasies are different, the root problems to address, the root causes, are quite similar, if not identical. So if you look at the proverbial example of the UK, the most mature market in the world, again, let's not go into the detail, but like lots of these global operators would have been here before. They would have seen it. So they've got a playbook as to how to address these issues. I'm brushing aside to what extent we would have been fully efficient to address them. But that would be the bottom line. The evolution of gambling regulation follows a certain pattern.
Yeah.
Get it regulated, because to your point, it's an already extant activity. Everyone's far better off when it's channeled into a regulated space. Bring the operators in, those that want to play it by the book. It's like in Brazil. I keep going back to having been heavily involved with that legislative and regulatory process as well. And then you've got the platform that you can bounce off to start adding layers of complexity, ideally in an efficient and sensible way, because now you've got, for want of better expression, the good guys or the guys that want to play it by the book within your regulated fold. Let's talk to them about what's next. So typically what's next is a debate about advertising rules. Guys, do you still need to carry on with some of your crazy adverts because arguably you've already gained some traction? And how about we sensibly step it up on the consumer protection side of things? Because otherwise there's a risk, to your other point, that you might keep overdoing it, and ultimately the public might get even more annoyed.
Yeah.
And they will start writing yet another round of letters to their representatives and go, oh, well, yeah, we appreciate that last time round we asked you to go and regulate this, but now we want you to go and ban it. And that is the final point, I promise. My book, my experience, like blanket bans are a recipe for disaster. Because to come finally full circle, it's not as though the gambling, the betting activities would go away. They would just be channeled out into the black market.
Yeah. Yesterday there was a presentation about like good intentions are paved by the way to the black market. I'm not sure if I'm referring to it real good. It was about banning physical casinos in cities. Like the desired outcome would be to have, less people gambling or to have less criminality. And the presentation has showed that it is really not the case. The most significant outcome of that is that there are less tax money in the city treasury for that. Yeah. So I guess that would be the case for many unintentional consequences. But you have provided a pretty solid guidelines on the regulation, how it could be done. But I can imagine that many things, except of those that you have mentioned on the responsible gambling part, on the blanket bans and requirements, there are other things that could go wrong. And I might ask in a way that I have heard like countless times for the past 2 or 3 years ago, not that much in a recent year, but before, that we are not going to do the same mistakes in the US with the regulation and with the progress as has been done in Europe. Do you think that the US regulation is succeeding in that? I'm not sure how to ask it properly, but basically, I do not want to point it to any single organization, to any single state, but basically, is it happening in the US in a way that mistakes are being avoided?
I'll try to keep it generic as well. And jokingly, you're really trying to get me expelled from the country. Brushing that.
But you are
aside,
good at diplomatic answers, so I have no doubt in that.
Yeah, I've dealt with a lot of politicians throughout my life, so that's always handy and helpful. I believe that the US market and all the bodies, including operators and many others that have been active in there, have learned some lessons from the European muck-ups.
Oh,
Again,
yeah.
I'm putting it in the nicest possible way. At the same time, I do believe that it's boiling down to the inevitable perennial clash between the need, that I've already alluded to generate revenue while protecting the customers.
Mhm.
Two absolutely non-negotiable imperatives. Let's be pragmatic
Yeah.
about this. So where do we draw the line in the sand? What is the level of commitment to responsible gambling? How is that captured in legislation? Because I suppose it's also fair to say that, and I'm not looking for a lame excuse, but like on the US First Amendment side of things, that also, as you know, extends to advertising, there's much more wiggle room than it would be in Europe, also pursuant to the applicable European and US consumer protection rules. So all in all, each jurisdiction is different, and there are effectively 50 jurisdictions within the US, so all these guys tend to do things slightly differently. To finally answer your question, I believe that the whole industry had, prior to going to the US, or even, recreating themselves within the US, like FanDuel and DraftKings going from DFS to effectively real money betting, had accumulated a whole wealth of knowledge that is now been deploying for quite some time. But that's not to say that as an industry, we would have gotten everything right. It's still work in progress. A lot needs to be done. And I suppose these days we're going to the stage, and that's the final point, that I would have dreamt of more than a few years ago. It's like the cross-pollination between what's been happening, not only in the US, but also throughout North and Latin America, South America, I should be saying, Brazil, Ontario, the US states. I know for a fact that a lot of the European states now, there may be not necessarily rethinking, but fine-tuning and finessing their regulatory models.
Yeah.
They've been certainly, as you know as well, they would have taken a very good look at the likes of Ontario in particular, the shining beacon of light in North America when it comes to consumer protection. So that very long story short, yeah, to some extent, I believe as an industry, we've learned from the mistakes of the past. And what I get to see ever increasingly is that we learn from each other across the variety of ponds that there are involved. So it's all intercontinental. At the same time, if I may use your own phrase, we're still figuring it out. The other end of the pond, but even in Europe.
To be honest, I would have been surprised if it would be like this. I mean, if even though you have an examples of things that go wrong, you just cannot click the switch again, because there are people sitting in the positions where they need to decide it, and they have certain experience, they have a certain state of mind in that time. And I can imagine that you would agree with me when you were going through these regulators and talking about things, that people who were sitting there, they wouldn't have the complete awareness about, right, these things are effective. This is how it got wrong over there. No, I mean, they have their own understanding, their own agendas, and you cannot change it just overnight. It is a gradual process, sort of like an evolution.
If I may, yeah, that is a great example of a potential, I want to call it mistake, misunderstanding, incorrect approach. Believing that the regulators know about this industry as much as those of us who've been around for quite a while do. And they're great people. They're very knowledgeable people, and in my experience, prepared to learn. So going back to our theme of figuring it out, typically we would have figured it out together. But you must not assume, that's probably the best, most adequate phrase to describe it, that whoever the person at the other end of the table is knows as much about this industry as some of the folks that, as I've said, been around the block for ages. At the same time, you need to appreciate the other person's perspective, be it creating jobs in Pennsylvania, or I'm using a random example,
Right.
or generating additional tax revenue in Brazil, or as we've established this morning at the wonderful conference organized by the Czech Institute for Responsible Gambling, launching new responsible gambling tools.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's well concluded in this way. I'm gonna jump to sweepstakes, and I'm gonna ask straight away. I'm not gonna make a big intro to it, but how can we deal with that in the U.S.? What are some of the ways? How can we deal with that? I'm gonna end here.
Yeah, so I suppose for contextual purposes, the US market or markets, it's fair to say, have gotten quite complex lately. As the audience knows, some 40 plus states have regulated sports betting. 8, or rather 7.5, because Nevada's never regulated online casino, have regulated online casino games across the piece, including poker. Besides that, in the last ever so few years, the casino sweepstakes cropped up. And these days you also have the prediction markets.
All right.
So it's somewhat reminiscent of the debates that we did have when I joined this industry. Like, what is legal? What is not legal? What action may the authorities be prepared to take against the individual gaming verticals or sweepstakes gaming? So in my book, I would always go back to the need to get the space regulated. And I totally appreciate it. These guys, perhaps cynically speaking, they had a great idea. Look, nobody else is doing this. There's no regulation yet in my book.
Yeah.
So how about we launch ourselves into that space? Or the new buzzword, prediction markets. And at least the current administration and CFTC considers prediction markets to be a legalized form of, if you will, I suppose, financial service / predictions. I'm trying to avoid the word gambling.
Right.
So, yet again, long story short, it's a very, very complex picture, but I would be coming back to the need of getting any such space regulated, start paying taxes. And the good thing about being regulated for everyone involved across the piece is manifold. One, it enhances the levels of player protection. 2, it generates tax funds for the governments and the good causes, or besides the good causes, of course, the economically necessary projects that they can use those funds to support with. It gives investors the certainty they are after. And while I'll be trying to avoid the corny phrase of it's the right thing to do, it is the right thing to do in a way that everybody should be prepared to pay taxes and play by the book when it comes to any activity they would be deploying.
What do you think would make these operators, whatever you call them, organizations, to agree to that? Because I've skipped the initial question, like, are they going to agree to that? I would think that since this is how they started, and the main reason wasn't like, we have this super idea, but it's not within the regulatory space. So, such a shame, we need to go underground with that. Yeah. But there are other reasons for it as well. So what do you think would make them to go towards this path?
It could be a shock to the system, maybe by means of law enforcement. It may be looking at Allwyn's acquisition of Prize Picks, and for obvious reasons not privy to any behind-the-scenes details, but Prize Picks seem to have dialed it down in terms of the level of their assertiveness, if you will. or those businesses, some of those businesses might not be listed in their own rights. Their shareholders may change, their investors may change. Once again, I will come back to the point about the need to create certainty for your investors. If the investors are happy with a heightened level of regulatory risk and uncertainty, don't get me wrong, that's totally fine. It's actually the original history of the online gambling industry that we've somewhat touched upon on this podcast as well. It's like going from not being regulated to being fully regulated. So it's also another critical factor is evolution and time. But just to sum up this answer, I believe what tends to help are these system shocks. Like, oh, guys, we no longer have any choice because either everyone's after us or the people that have been funding us, they want us to shift to the new, regulated, much more sophisticated place.
Yeah, I guess there needs to be some sort of a pressure always. You cannot rely on just doing things right in like ethical manner or manner by a principle. So, even with what we see with our safety index and making pressure on casinos, the lower our traffic is that in that given time, the lower are the motivations for these operators to make a decision, right? Okay, we will do some things differently in order to have a higher rating with us, because it directly relates on how many people are going to see them and how many people are going to have an understanding of how reliable they are. So the change of status quo just doesn't happen like that. And I think it's one of the things that we need to work with.
Now, if I may, very briefly, maybe running out of time, I suppose, but spot on. It's like ultimately, it's customer driven. It's the consumer demand. Lots of folks out there that would be happy with betting on whatever site, as long as, I suppose, cynically speaking, they get their money back. But my understanding is that this is not really how the younger generation drives about things. They want to engage, they're keen on engaging with ethical businesses. So doing business with some kind of fly-by-night operators, it's not really their jam. And I would hate to overgeneralize and turn it into a clash of generations. But it's like even myself, and I've always been told by wherever I was, the comms team, so don't say ever that you do not gamble because it comes across terrible. I'm like, no, I'm not a gambler. I do fantasy leagues. I love my sports and whatnot. But what I was going to say, when I do my other shopping, I'm after quality and efficiency, including price efficiency. I have to admit that I wouldn't be that fussed about, not ethics, but not that fussed, or I wouldn't spend too much time looking up how ethical the business may or may not be.
Yeah.
Whereas there are lots of folks out there, and they deserve all the credit in the world, that do that. So I suppose that's another key factor. Like, could we be losing customers if we chose not to do things the right way?
Again, a pragmatic or realistic approach to that. And I think it's sort of like coming back, because a lot of idealism in a form of like doing an ethical decision, I think without the pressure, without the reasons why, which can cause real things to people, I would say that it might be a bit naive to expect that the majority of people, considering businesses, is going to be behaving in this way. And it's a good thing to work with. I would like to conclude this discussion with the question, because normally we would talk a lot about, what is effective, helpful in fighting gambling-related harm. We use this time to talk about the US. I think it's appropriate, but still, I want to circle back to this and conclude it. So you must have seen a lot of things. A lot of things are out there. What for you is sort of like a good combination of things that we can be doing that are effective in reducing gambling harm? Perhaps even things that are coming based on technology and based on innovation. I guess the question is, what is the next thing? What is the next effective thing that are going to help us to reduce it in a overall manner.
I believe what's critically important is individualization of the care here. So you're talking about technology. I have a lot of belief in technology in the sense that it helps us detect the negative behavioral patterns. Lots of great organizations out there, as you know, that are engaged with this space and keep the evolution going. At the same time, I'm a big believer, as I've already said, in rapport and talking to people. Might sound plain and simple, but ultimately, if we are after an individualized or individual approach, you need to go and to the extent you can and to the extent required, meet the person. So give the customer a ring. Or even chat with the customer. Now approach them and ask them for explanations. Oh, we've noticed a spike in your betting behavior, or you've started spending more money, and there might be a logical answer. But there might not be. And if there isn't, then we need to have the means and the tools to address that as well. So I suppose the final point to wrap up this answer would be to say it's also material, if not, again, critically important, to contextualize this issue. We must avoid putting it into its little silo. It's the hypey word, but still, it's part of the overall mental health space and picture. There might be other factors in play. So, again, great work by great organizations out there who had already spotted all this many, many years ago and are now trying to shift the debate from a pure focus on problem responsible gambling and all the tools and helplines. Still very, very important that looking at the root causes and then addressing the root causes by means of treatment through mental health and psychology platforms. I think a combination of all this, use technology the right way, talk to people, tone of voice, what messages are being conveyed, and not tearing irresponsible gambling out of context will be crucial for the evolution of responsible gambling going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I think this was
been a real pleasure.
Very nice conclusion. Yeah, again, happy that we are able to meet at one place and talk. It was a very good debate. I hope that our listeners can take some insights from it, and I appreciate you sneaking out some things or so of your future also. I'm looking forward when this is going to be official.
That's very kind. We haven't even had time to talk about the likes of hockey. I'm sure we'll do it next time. But
yes,
it's been an absolute pleasure.
I've had that at the back of my mind.
Thanks again for having me.
Perhaps next time. Thank you, Martin.
Thank you.